In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to create fire in After Effects. So it's surprisingly simple. There's no plugins required, there's no particles used, there's really not even any pre-comping necessary, and you could use this effect for text like you see here, but this could just as easily be used for logos or any other shapes that you want. So let's start off by creating a new composition. I'm going to make this 1920 by 1080. I'm going with 60 frames per second because I just think this effect looks good at a high frame rate, but feel free to use a lower one. Press OK. Now what I want to do is start off by creating a new solid. So let's go in here. Actually, let's kind of frame up a little bit better. Okay, so right click, new in this area, right click, go to new, go to solid, and hit this button just to make sure that you're matching your comp size, and then we're good with that. Actually, we could call this something here while we're here. Fire, that's not a bad name for this tutorial. I already got it typed in here, but the beam, this is the base for our fire effect. So type in beam and then drag your beam on here. And if you like shooting lasers, this is also a fun effect, but I'm going to set the length to 100% so that it goes from one point to the other completely. And I want to start messing with the thickness. So hold down shift and just start dragging this up, and then do the same thing for the ending thickness here. So we got some larger starting and ending thickness. And okay, so it doesn't look much like fire, but if we take this pink swatch, click on it, find a yellow, maybe bring it a little bit more intense. And okay, so this is almost fire. We just have to add some distortion to it. And I don't really want to see these round edges, so I want to make sure that this side and this side are off screen. I could show a little bit every now and then if I have a kind of a wiggle effect on here. I'm not too worried about that, but I don't want to see like this much. If I see that rounded edge just a little bit is good. So I kind of line these up with the edges. That'll get you there. And the next thing I need to do is add some random movement. And random movement is going to be really key for getting this effect to look natural. So option click on your starting thickness, and we're gonna do a wiggle. So once you start typing WIG, you should see it pop up in the list, and then you can just press tab to accept that. I'm gonna make this, I don't know, 3, well, let's see here. We're set to 600, so maybe I'll give it a variation of 200, and we'll just do a preview, see how that looks. And I think that's gonna work fairly well. Just make sure I'm previewing this in real time. Actually, maybe that's a little bit fast. I'm going to take this down to 2. Let's try that. And also, I'm going to copy this because I want to apply something similar to the ending thickness. So I'm going to hold down Option, click on that, and then I could paste that. Let's make this maybe a little bit faster, 2.5. And we'll have it move a little bit less. So I want it to be similar, but not exactly the same. And so let's say 160, something like that. We'll test this out, see how things are working. Okay, and I think that is a good start. Now this line is just straight across, and I want to add some variation to that. I can probably get away with copying and pasting. Well, I've copied already. So I could probably paste in the starting and ending point. So I'm going to hold on Option, click on the starting point, and go to wiggle 2 by 200. This might be a bit of a high number here. Let's make this, I don't know, let's try 100. That still might be too high, but let's just see what it does. I could zoom out so I could get a better understanding of what's going on. Okay, so it's not too bad. If I was seeing a little bit too much of the rounding, what I could do is always just come over here and just drag this more to the left. So I'll just do that now. And you know what? Maybe to compensate, I'll make this go to 200. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna copy this and Option click on my ending point here and paste that. Again, I'm gonna make it I made this one, the ending thickness, I sped it up compared to the other one. So I'm going to slow this down. I'm going to make this maybe 1.5, and I'll give it 230 just for the fun of it. And if I see the round edge a little bit too much over, yeah, so this is what I was hoping would kind of show up. So if I see that, remember, these expressions work on top of the actual sliders here. So I could take the ending point and move it over. And now I know I'm never going to have to worry about it coming too far over to the left. So that is kind of our random beam animation. Let's spice this up with a bit of turbulence, T-U-R-B-U. So turbulent display, so we can drop that in here. Now I'm going to collapse the beam. What we got here is some settings that we should change, and let's set the amount up fairly high. Okay, that should work. And let's take the size and bring that down fairly low, 20, something like that'll work. The complexity, let's up that. Maybe we'll just double that so we start to see some details in here. All right, so now it almost looks like we're playing with fire, and we just want to add some animation to it. So I want to add offset. We got two values here. So when I option click on this and come down to this bottom area here, I want to make sure that I set myself up for two values. So I'm going to do an open and close bracket. And it's pretty easy to do because you just type the left bracket and then the right bracket. And now we go in between. And I want to set this to X comma Y. So what is X? Well, we don't want anything for that. So we do 0 comma, and now we do the Y value. So for that, we'll do time times 100. And I don't know why, but time times 100 seems like it's usually the best starting point. So now if we play this, we're going to see it looks like our fire is going in the wrong direction, downwards, when it should be going upwards, but we'll fix that later on. So the next thing is evolution. Option click on evolution, and let's try just time times 100. This is only one value, so that makes it easier. And let's see how this looks. All right, let's go even higher. Let's go to 300. That takes care of that, but what's the fun of turbulence if we just have one? Let's do a double turbulence. To make life easier, we could simply select our turbulence and press Command D. Now we've got a double turbulence. But what does it mean? Well, if we make some adjustments, it means we're going to get a much more natural looking distortion. So let's change some settings here. I'm going to go for the amount, and I'm going to take this. Actually, I'm going to hold down Shift as I drag. I'm going to take this into the negative so I can start pushing things away from the edge there. So you see how that kind of gives us a little bit more interesting edge. And I'm going to go for a larger size. Well, not that large. Don't hold the Shift on that one. So I'm going to go, I don't know, somewhere around here. Yeah, so these are all going to vary depending on your composition size and other settings. So just find something that looks right for you. But I'm going to take the complexity up. I don't know, something like that should work. Now we've got already some options set here for offset and evolution, but I want to customize those a little bit also. And I'm going to, just to get things a little bit more clean here, I'm going to collapse this layer, and I'm going to press E twice really fast. So EE, and these are just going to show me the things that have expressions. And I got turbulent displace number 2, matching that up here, turbulent displace number 2, so that I could change these settings. We'll set them to, I'm going to keep this 0 and time times not 100, but negative 100. Actually, not negative 100. Let's go with a bigger, go home. That's what my grandmother always told me. So I had an eating disorder. Okay. So the next thing is time. We've got this one here, time times 300. I don't know. Let's set this to maybe 100. Just see how that works. and got to click in an empty spot here so I don't start typing in a new expression. And that is starting to look fire-ish. To get a little bit more interesting distortion, let's add a CC vector blur. So VECT vector blur, just click and drag this down here. And I'm going to give myself a little bit more room. Actually, I'll collapse this. And let's find some settings that work for us. Okay, so I'm going to change the type to direction fading. And isn't that better? So the next thing we need to do is bring the amount up. Let's say something like that'll do it. And let's go with the revolutions. The revolutions will not be televised, but they'll be in our After Effects project. And map softness, let's bring this down. So if it goes too high, it's just going to look cheesy. If it goes too low, it's going to look too Monet. And we just want to bring this somewhere to the point where it starts to look good. All right, so yeah, you can see, okay, that is starting to help make things look better. The angle offset, so I want to change that, and I'm going to hold down Option and click on angle offset so we can set an expression for it. Let's type in, let's do a wiggle, WIG, and you'll see, well, it's kind of off the screen here. Let's bring this up a little bit here. Just so you know, WIG, and then you can see it highlighted in that list, and just press tab to accept that. And we want this to be 1,360. Give it the chance to go fully around. And let's take a look at what this looks like. And just as a tip, if you're going back and you're changing any of these later, what you can do is, well, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure the layer is selected if you have multiple layers. Here we have one, so it's not a big issue. But if I wanted to change my vector blur, you see how I have it selected up here and the layer is still selected. I don't want to click on it because that's going to actually make this go away. So you got to make sure this is still highlighted here, and you press EE twice on the keyboard really fast. And this is really helpful because if I could change this window, you could see the thing that I have selected up here is selected down here. And that's really good because I got things that are named similar like Turbulent Displace 2 and Turbulent Displace. So it just makes easier finding and sorting of things doing it that way. A little trick, I actually just learned it about, I don't know, a few minutes ago. So now I'm just shouting it out to the world because I learned something new. Okay, so the effect, let's take a look at it now. So it's starting to look pretty good. We can go into the revolutions if we want. We could add a little bit more detail, and you can see kind of if you go too far with it, it's going to look bad. But yeah, go into these settings, see if you find something you like. You can also take a look at the amount too to see if you can get a better result. But there's definitely a bad extreme to either the high or the low. So you got to kind of find what works right. You don't want too many of those little lines, and trying to get something that looks good. Okay, so I think something like that'll work. But yeah, definitely don't ever feel satisfied with just like whatever you first come up with. Go back into these, go into all these settings here, come back into Turbulent Displace 2, see what happens if you make some adjustments here. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Mess with the amount, mess with the scale. I'm not saying that these are good, but if you take your time and go through these, you're definitely going to get the best results. So this one is not having a huge impact, but you could see if it goes too extreme in one direction or the other, it's just not going to look good. And yeah, I think actually this one, I could tone it down a little bit, maybe. All right, so yeah, that is the basic setup for the fire. If all we needed was a fire background, we could just call it a day and quit here. But if you made it this far, you're probably not the type that settles for just background. So let's see what we could do with adding this to, we could add it to either a logo shape or we could add it to text. Let's add it to text. So I'm gonna click the type tool and type fire and just place it somewhere in the middle of our fire. Okay, so now what I want to do is, well, first a little bit of cleanup work here. These two layers are named the same thing. Well, one is capital, so that's kind of a giveaway, but I want to select this one and press return and call this one fire base. And that's just going to make things a little bit more clear for the next step. And while we're down here, let's make sure we set this track mat. And if you look in the bottom left hand corner, make sure these two things are checked on here so that you can see all the settings. And I'm going to go to click on this track mat section here, and this first one, yeah, so that works. And what I want to do now is go back to my text layer, my type layer, and go in here. I've typed this already, but DISP, that should get you close enough. Displacement map under the distort section here. Let's drop this in, and we need to choose layer 2 Firebase because we're set by default to the layer that the effect is currently on. We want to look at layer 2, and you can see not much is going on here. It kind of shifted a little bit, but as I increase these numbers here, it starts to move around more, but this is kind of moving. It's not really displacing. What I need to do is click source and set that to effects and mask, because right now it's looking at this layer, but it's not looking at the effects that have been applied to that layer, but now it is. And as we increase these numbers, you're going to see, okay, that looks a little bit better. So we've got a few different options here. We could look at individual color channels. We could look at alpha, luminance, lightness, and those are probably the most important things. Let's start off with alpha, just because alphabet and stuff like that, alphabetical order, I should say. So now if I change the horizontal, you can see, okay, we got that. Got to be careful. I think I want more displacement on the vertical, so I'm gonna go with that. And if you're just not happy with alpha only, you could just make sure this is clicked on, press Command D, and this one we could set its values to, let's go with the red channel. All right, so you can see it's a little bit different, but let's push it a little bit more out here and out here. And I could continue doing this until it just goes overboard, but I'm going to change this one. Okay, so we use alpha, we use the red channel. I could use the blue and green channels, but let's use luminance and luminance here. So red, red, alpha, alpha, luminance, luminance. Now, you know, there's going to be a certain point where it's just too distorted, but this is going to give us a little bit more variation for the distortion. You could mess with all these settings. You could add 3 more, or maybe you just want to use one displacement map, but it's pretty simple now, and you can see it renders fairly quickly. So I'm not too worried about adding 3 or 4 different displacement maps on here for that extra variety. And if it's just not moving, say it's not moving enough horizontally, I could just take some of these values. Sorry, this is the horizontal, and increase that up a little bit. When I look at this playing, it's going to look more legible when it is possibly in a still here, in a still frame. So something that looks terrible on the still might look okay in the actual render. Actually, I think I kind of like this big vertical displacement here. Don't go overboard, but just push this just about as far as you can get it. And you can always dial things back or even turn some of these off if you want a more subtle look. I think I'm going to stick with this over the top look. For some finishing touches, let's add some glow and also some color correction with curves. What we want to do is add a new adjustment layer. I'm going to right click in here, go to new and adjustment layer. You can call this, we'll call this glow. And what I want to do here is I want to go in and first I want to add the glow effect and then the curves. And that might seem counterproductive, but just bear with me here and I'll explain how this works. Type in glow, we'll go to stylize glow and drop this in here. Actually drop this in the effects, that makes more sense. What I want to do is not worry too much about how it looks, but just getting the glow how I like it. And you want to make sure you're working on 32 bits. If it says 8 BPC here, just hit Option or Alt click here a couple times. It goes from 8, 16 to 32. And then what you could do is go to the glow radius. I want something kind of big like that. That should work. And you can adjust the threshold so that the parts that glow have to be above a certain amount of brightness. And I'm going to stick with something like that. And then we could take the intensity up or down. I don't want like a solid shape starting to form here, so I'll take the intensity down just before that kind of deal starts happening. This is the glow I want, but everything is blown out here. So now is where the curves comes in. So let's find curves. CURV curves. I want to drop it in here, but I want to put it above. Just normally, or if I drop it onto the actual layer here, it's going to be below. Collapse this up here, below the glow. We don't want it to be below the glow. No, no, no. So let's bring it above. And now what I'm going to do is start adjusting the RGB. So, okay, you can see, all right, we got the glow that we like. And now we could start bringing down some of those blown out areas. I could even take the very end here and bring that down if I want to just start to reduce that brightness completely. But let's not do that just quite yet. And I could bring these dark areas up here if I want, and feel free to get wiggly with it. So usually I don't like to have these wiggly lines for my curves here, but I'm okay with that in this instance, having kind of this bumpy look here. I'm going to put one towards the top and then just take this high end here and just start to bring that down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go into the individual color channels. I could click them here, but I could see the red line. I'm just going to click on that. It's going to be a little bit faster. And I can see this is not having much effect except for on the overall glow. As I bring this up here, I can bring a point here. One thing I definitely want to avoid if I can is getting these flat lines here. As long as it looks okay though, you know, feel free to do whatever you want. So, all right, unless you want green, you want to avoid going too far with it like that. So, all right, let's look at the green line here. And you can see that's actually having a pretty intense effect. Let's bring this down and let's look at some of these darker areas here, and some of the brighter areas for that one. And okay, so this not doing too much at this far to the left. Maybe over here, this will, yeah, this kind of make things a little intense. This will kind of flip things around and start to look terrible. So be careful about that. And be careful about these like really flat areas with no detail. Try to take this one. Maybe I'll take this very end, bring it down. Maybe I'll move it over here. All right, and then we still have the blue. It's a little bit obscured, so if I need to, I could just click the drop down, select blue. It'll pop that in front of everything. Blue kind of adds a tint, like a pinkish tint or more of a yellowish tint, but I like this yellow look here. It's looking pretty intense, and I think this is working fairly well. I might still go back into the glow itself and reduce that, but nothing's really happening here, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. Not much is going on here. I think we've got just about as much as we can out of this curves. I could also go back to the RGB if I need to just kind of take things down a slight bit and go back to my glow. I'm going to collapse this. Go back to my glow. If I want to do something like maybe increase the radius or adjust the threshold and just get this exactly how I want. This is a really glowing, bright, hot look. Maybe I'll take this down from 0.9 to 0.8 or maybe in 0.7. Let's try 6. That might be a little bit much. But yeah, so we could turn this off and you can see, you know, this was our fire. It looked okay before, but now we got something that really, you know, feels like it's got some heat to it. And let's do a render, see how this looks. Okay, so that's looking a little bit more intense and bright, and it looks like it's casting light. So all the things that you want fire to be. Now, the last thing we could do is see how we could transition this in and out of the screen. The transitions for this effect are controlled by that first beam we put in here on this fire base level. So let's collapse everything else. Let's look at the beam. I'm going to look at the starting point and the ending point. So the starting point has a wiggle effect on it. The ending point doesn't, probably should, but I'll live without that. And I want those, well, let's select it so we could see the actual targets there. So let's say it takes about 1 second to transition on. So at this point, 1 second, we want those 2 points right here. So let's hit their stopwatches. And then with this layer selected, we could press U and grab these 2 keyframes and press F9. And now we've got easy ease. So we just need to go back to the beginning here, and you could see this could be a transitioning from side to side. It could be like a rotating thing if you want, but I'm just going to drag these basically straight down until the fire is not within the text anymore. Somewhere I can see just a couple pixels left. I'm just going to bring it down right about there. That should do it. I don't want to be so far down where I'm going to lose sight of how things are working, but so we'll see that the fire is going to come up. We will hold it till about 3 seconds. So clicking these and dragging down on these 2 arrows, that'll give us 2 new placeholder keyframes. And let's have it come up a little bit faster, or fly up a little bit faster than it came from the bottom here. And for this one, maybe we'll do something like bring this up so it kind of moves at a bit of an angle, kind of going against what I said earlier. Let's take a look and see how this renders out. Okay, so that is pretty much it for creating this fire effect. We got the transition on and off. The last thing I would do for anything like this, it would be to go back in here and take a look at stuff like maybe you want this faster or slower. You could do that by adjusting the speed of our offset for turbulent displays. You might want more distortion, less distortion, but what I like to do is get to the end of the effect, apply everything, and then see, can I make this a little bit better